are back with another great edition of Building Rapport. Today, rejoining us as a special guest that you guys have all gotten used to, Mr. Cole Cubelic joins me to talk a little bit about what linemen have to do this spring to win the spring. So I want to bring Cole in right now. Cole, thanks for joining me.
Hey, absolutely. Always good to be with you. Appreciate you having me.
Hey, Cole, let's jump right in. Coach Hugh Freeze brought in a lot of offensive linemen. The last time you were with us, you talked about Dylan Wade. I want to dig into him a little bit more about why you think this kid is going to be the real deal here at Auburn. It's a lot of guys vying for a spot this spring. Tell us again, what makes Dylan Wade special?
Well, first off is the size and the athleticism. You just don't see guys that are put together like him be able to change directions, being able to have the kind of body control that he has. He's got great physicality. I mean, he gets after it. He's got a nasty streak. He finishes, and even still in an offense that at times would go fast and maybe didn't do a lot of things that asked you to get north and south and kind of maul people. He still had that mentality. You could see it when he was at Tulsa. So his combination of athletic ability and strength and power and size is just rare to find. But technique-wise, he's also solid. He knows hand placement, hat placement. He's not a guy that continuously gets his hands outside the framework. So there's a lot to like, but the power that comes along with the ability to get side to side, change directions, good pad level, things like that. He's got a lot of God-given ability that not a lot of offensive linemen have.
In your estimation, what do you think about him in run blocking versus pass blocking? Last year, Auburn struggled on both, but toward the end of the year, they were really good in run blocking, running up 303 yards on Alabama, the most in the Nick Saban era any opponent has done. What do you feel like is his strength here based on what you've seen on tape?
Yeah, I mean, the scheme will be similar that he's going to play in, so that's a big advantage. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be very foreign to him what he's asked to do, and that's kind of one of the things, like I mentioned before, that I was impressed with is that even though it was a scheme that's not always asking you to utilize combo blocks or double teams to move guys 2 and 3 yards off the football, he was still able to do that at times. So he's somebody that has a lot of raw power, can get movement when he needs to. And I think he'll be asked to do that in the run game. I mean, I think if this offensive line improves in the rate that I think that they can, I think they're going to try to lean on that group a little bit. Some of that will depend on the quarterback situation, but they're going to have good backs. They're obviously they might have a mobile quarterback, and the overall talent on the offensive line is going to improve. So I think there's a possibility that you go in and you try to kind of lean on that group early on and try to make whatever quarterback is playing for his life as comfortable as possible, utilizing the run game, then utilizing play action, then throwing in some RPOs. But Dylan's going to be able to get a push in the run game. I have no doubt about that.
Do you think it's easier maybe to learn run blocking schemes than it is pass blocking schemes for a lot of linemen?
To learn it, no. To execute it, maybe. Depending on your level of talent, if you're put together and you have the gifts that like a Kendall Simmons has, then run blocking is a lot easier because you have that raw power and you have that brute strength to be able to just move people. If you're built a little bit more like I was, then the finesse portion of pass blocking probably comes a little bit easier to you. But as far as learning it, run blocking technique I think is a little less complicated than pass pro. And so much of that has to do with, the aggressive nature of run blocking a lot of times will still allow you to be right, even if you're wrong. If you don't even a guy up, or if you kind of, if you don't get your hat placed right where you need to, if you have a motor and energy and you finish, a lot of times you can make it right. In pass pro, I mean, it can be boom, boom. And it's if you take one false step or you try to punch a little bit too early, you could be done. So I think perfecting one or the other, I would probably say that run blocking would be a little bit easier than pass pro.
Yeah, so Hugh Freeze has talked a lot about quarterbacks and how he's been unable to evaluate Cole based on lack of pass protection that's on tape, right? So he doesn't know how these guys really would react under normal circumstances. Based on what you've seen from Auburn last year headed into this year, how big a jump is the jump that they're hoping the offensive line makes in production from 1 year? This will be a whole new offensive line that's going to be starting just about. So you got some holdovers, but, you know, how big a jump is it that they're trying to make in terms of improvement this spring and this summer?
Yeah. Well, I think you want to make a massive leap, and I think the group has the ability to do that because the level of talent is going to be 3-4 steps ahead of where it was last year. And then on top of that, you throw in a lot of snaps that a lot of these guys have played. I mean, you mentioned Dylan Wade. You know, he comes in, he played a ton of snaps at Tulsa. You know, you get a center from ECU and Avery Jones that's played a lot of football. Now, certain people would say they ain't played in the SEC or, you know, against who? But the reality is they played a lot of snaps and they understand the speed of the game. They understand the physicality of the game. They understand what's expected of them in practice. You know, Jeremiah Wright got good reps last year, and he's one of those guys that brings that brute force, that strength, that power to that offensive line. So you're going to have a lot of guys that have played a lot of snaps. And I think that level of understanding, some of it how to operate together, some of it how to have that continuity is going to help that group maybe go a little bit further than they did a season ago. And then just the level of ability, the ceiling at which the individuals are going to be able to operate is going to be different than it was last season. So I can't sit here and tell you exactly what Kendall and Jake and Coach Freeze really believe they want to get to as far as the level of improvement. But I think just by what you have and who you have working with them and what the system is. I mean, I don't really know a way to tiptoe around it, but there are portions of this scheme that can protect an offensive line and that can work around an offensive line that is not elite and doesn't get a push maybe on a regular basis. Now, that's not how they want to operate, but they can design certain things to aid in that. So when you throw all of those things together, I think that there's an opportunity for the group to really take a few big steps and to be a lot better than they were a season ago. Now, does that mean they're going to be on par with Michigan and Georgia and Texas A&M and LSU and teams like that? Probably not, just because you still have some guys that haven't played a lot. You still have some guys that haven't played at this level, and this group will not have been together for very long.
Right.
And that's the part that, like, Michigan winning the Joe Moore Award the last 2 years, Georgia being up for it, those guys had played multiple seasons together. Like 3, 4, and 5 of them had been together for years. You don't just get that in a spring practice, in a fall practice, in one summer. You got to be in games together to have that understanding of how to operate. And sometimes it takes a year, 2, 3 years to be able to get to that level. So all that being said, Mike, it wasn't very good last year.
Right.
No matter how we spin it. So to take a fairly big jump should not be an impossible task, no matter how you look at it.
Because the bar is on the floor. But let me ask you this, because you said something that I find interesting, and something that I've said repeatedly, is that the scheme, I felt like, made these guys look worse than they might have been in actuality, right? You know, how much of it, you know, is scheme, in your estimation? You know, can a good scheme make a bad offensive line look average, or an average offensive line look good? You know, if you're a lineman, how hard is it to overcome a bad scheme if you are not, you know, all world?
It can work both ways easily. I mean, I'll go back to, I can't remember if it was I think it was 2 years ago, and you know, all the Florida folks were saying that they, after 3 weeks, you know, we got the best offensive line in college football and this and that. And, you know, they were kind of, you know, some spy duty with Anthony Richardson and Emory Jones, and it's like, no, when you watch it, that's not why you have 232 rushing yards a game or whatever it was. It's, you know, your quarterbacks are leaving the pocket. You have designed quarterback runs. So, and back to last year, that can be a tough scheme to play in. It's very different, but also there are parts of that are very forgiving to an offensive lineman. Like, I mean, the stretch zone play, which that offense is essentially based upon. And you can go to a lot of other places and look at it. You know, Louisville the last couple of years, App State, you know, what Mississippi State's going to be bringing in, that's going to be the same stuff. Baylor is the same way. You know, BYU, they're all built on that stretch play. That allows you to not have to move people 2, 3, 4 yards off the ball in order to be successful. Then that opens up your boot action. That opens up some of your RPOs. Your deep shot plays usually come off that elongated play action on the stretch play. It widens the surface of the defense, which gives you bigger gaps to be able to run inside zone into. Then you can start running your pin and pull stuff when guys are upfield out of position. So it can be forgiving. It's just it maybe takes a little bit longer to have an understanding of how it operates, and it does ask for a little bit more physicality. I think Hugh and Coach Montgomery will have aspects of that, but they also have the other part of it that if the group's not really capable of that, I think they can turn to that in certain points in time and say, well, this is what we're going to lean on for our running game because we can't do that. So I do think that a scheme can cover guys up. It's probably easier to cover guys up than it is to implement a scheme and help guys just be better at what they're doing. That rarely happens. And if you took those kids last year and put them into what Michigan's doing, like, it's just not going to look good. There's no way around that.
Right.
Now, if you put them in what Ole Miss is doing, and they're going 100 miles an hour, and they're throwing RPOs, and everything's tagged, and you have 3 options on every play, and defenses don't really know what to do or where to go, like, you might look pretty good. So it works both ways, and I think that this group will have a lot of those luxuries to be able to help them be better. That could be tempo at times. That could be RPO game. That could be quarterback run game. All of those things help sort of freeze a defense, which gives you an advantage. And then, too, I just think that, when you look at how certain formations and plays are going to be designed, it's going to help the offensive line be a little bit better at what they're asked to do.
Sticking with the physical part of this discussion, Jeremiah Wright's coming in at 6'5", 345. Dylan Wade's coming in at 6'4", 296. Tate Johnson's coming in at 6'4", 295. Are these guys physically ready and at the size that they need to be to play in this league? Just like his linemen built smaller and a little faster and more nimble for what they wanted to do. Where do they need to be?
As long as the level of conditioning is there, I don't really look at weights as an issue or a great benefit anymore. You can get guys that are massive, but they can hardly get in people's way.
Right.
Everybody was pissing their pants at the combine over Dwan Jones from Ohio State, and he's 6'8" and he's 378. But if you go watch him in college, like he just kind of got in people's way. He's not a dominant tackle as far as technique, fundamentals, and how he blocks people, and that's not going to work at the next level. So, as long as the conditioning is there, you can get away playing at 290 this day and age. Because think about it, offensive lines are a little bit lighter in some of these teams that are running tempo and pace, but a lot of the defenses are lighter because there are a lot more hybrid players. There are a lot more outside linebackers that are edge defenders now. There are a lot more DNs that are sliding down and playing, inside over centers and guards. There are a lot of safeties that are coming up and playing linebackers in different spots. I mean, nickel is basically everybody's base defense now. It's an extra DB on the field. So By nature, defenses are lighter. The Terrence Cody's and, those kind of immovable objects at nose guard, those are a rarity these days. We don't get a ton of those anymore. And the fact that Auburn got Justin Rogers, I think, is a plus, but I don't expect him to be a 70 snap a game guy, because that's really not what that defense is going to ask for all the time. So it's, football is just a little bit different in that I don't think you need to be 320, 330 to be able to move people and be successful. But as you also stated, you don't want to be too heavy to where the fact that it starts to mess with your conditioning and you're not able to finish the game, or you're not able to be at your best after you've played 55 snaps.
Right, because you're not subbing in and out linemen, right, unless it's an injury for the most part. And to your point, defenses are rotating a lot of guys these days, right? It's very common to rotate in a lot of defensive linemen. So if the conditioning is there to go up against fresh bodies, essentially the whole game, if a team that you're playing, which a lot of them do have the depth, or at least attempt to have the depth, conditioning will be super important, I think. Now they've got a new strict conditioning coach down on the plane. I remember talking to Coach Yacht, and he wasn't a big bench press guy. He said, you don't play the game on your back. I don't know why you would do this on your back, a million times. But what kind of new things
you also don't run 7 fucking miles during a game. And,
right.
he had us doing that before we would work out as well. So we could counter that with Yachts if you wanted to.
Okay, fair enough. What kind of new things are you seeing in strength and conditioning for linemen that are helping them get prepared for today's game? I mean, I feel like guys are getting stronger and faster with the advent of sports nutrition being a lot better than it was back when you played. And the science has just evolved so much. These guys have so many tools at their disposal that maybe you didn't have. I mean, you went to school, probably grabbed a ham sandwich, ate 3 of them, and then went to practice. Now they've got whole nutrition plans. They've got a lot more resources here. You know, what other new things are you seeing or hearing that the linemen are doing?
It's funny, and I love Coach Yox. He's amazing, but like that, I am literally the antithesis of the story that you just brought up to talk about. When I finished my second year at Auburn, I was the strongest player on the team. I had the strongest bench on the team, and we went through one season with Yox, and my bench went from like 495 to like 385 in one off season. And I mean, I was pissed. I was furious. And he and I kind of had it out in his office one time. I'm like, listen, man, I've seen those D tackles out in the Pac-12 because he came from UCLA. I was like, this ain't Skip Hicks and Cade McNown out here, brother. Like I got to play against Cornelius Griffin, and I got to play against Richard Seymour and Marcus Stroud and Gerard Warren. Like, these are different animals, dude. And he's like, well, if you're not in shape to do it, it doesn't really matter. So he and I butted heads there. It all ended up working out. He ended up doing a lot of great things for Auburn for a very long time. But today, the biggest difference between when I played and now, and this actually isn't just back to when I played. I mean, this is probably the biggest difference from maybe 7, 8 years ago, are the designated workouts, not only for position groups, but individuals. I mean, you'll have a group of guards who their workouts actually vary, or corners and their workouts actually vary because certain guys need to work on certain things. And they have the GPS units now that give you all these computer readouts. They have these monitors in your weight room, in your rack that you're working out with, that can give you readouts of physical movements and where your power is being generated from. Now it's not near as much about how much weight you can move. It's how quickly you can move it, which essentially is building your explosiveness and building more explosive power. So they would rather see you move 250 pounds extremely fast than move 450 pounds in a very slow, methodical way. But at the end of the day, you actually do get it up. So it's really cool, a lot of the different stuff that they're doing. It's all catered to position groups, and then it's catered to individuals a little bit more. It's all tracked in a certain way to see, where guys are improving, where they're not, where more emphasis needs to be placed on them improving. So, the best part for linemen is there's a much bigger dedication to generating explosive power, which is essentially moving weight faster. Right. And Yachts makes a great point. I mean, a lot of the stuff doesn't make sense. Like a lineman running a 40, that happens like 2 or 3 times in a season. Bench press, he's right. You don't play the game on your back. So there are a lot of things that are nonsensical and not necessarily applicable to being a great football player, but you still have to try and generate the strength and the force. It's just now it's much more specific as to what they know your body needs to be good at what your position asks you to do. And so therefore workouts are built much more around that.
I always find it interesting, how these guys have evolved at that position over the years. Again, Gus, had a very specific plan for his linemen. And it was make them small, make them nimble so they can get out and move in blocking space. So conditioning super important, but now guys are getting bigger and faster. So they're playing at a higher rate, but with better conditioning. I want to pivot, though, and talk about winning the spring if you're an offensive lineman. Again, a lot of competition is going to be happening on this line. You spoke about chemistry. You spoke about how long some of these better offensive lines in college football have been together. How do you develop that chemistry with your teammates, and what kind of things are linemen doing to learn how to play next to the guy that's going to be on that line with them all fall?
Well, there are a lot of ways to prepare you to understand how to do it, but there's only one way to prepare you to be able to do it, and that is to do it at or close to full speed against people who are trying to make you look bad. Mm-hmm. That's it. Plain and simple. Like, receivers can go catch balls. Running backs can take handoffs and do the rope drills and tire drills and all that other jazz. Like, DBs can work on their back pedal. Defensive linemen can work rip and swim, and, they can run around the big giant hula hoops and all that other stuff. Like, yeah, linemen can practice their pass sets, and you can take your steps. Like I used to go snap. I mean, Ben Leard and I would go out every day in the summer and get, literally 400 and 500 snaps a day. And you're working inside zone to the right, inside zone to the left, outside zone to the right, outside zone to the left, counter right, counter left, pass pro, quick pass. You're working all of it, and he's working his drops, and I'm working my steps. But did that help me be able to block people better? Not really. It gave me, it removed part of me having to think about doing some of those things during an actual game or during full speed sessions. But the only way to be good at playing offensive line is to do it against people full speed that are doing it full speed against you. And the only way to then be a great offensive line is to do that same thing together. So how do you win the spring? I think the first thing is everybody having an understanding of alignment, assignment, and then give great effort with that. So how do they want you to line up? How do they want you to get lined up? Where do they want you to go after the ball snap? Are they going to operate in, out of a huddle, whatever that is? The communication at the line of scrimmage, understand that. Is the center making the mic call? What does that predetermine for everybody else? Tight ends, running backs, quarterbacks. How much control does the quarterback have? How much do the guard and tackles communicate? The center call everything for the entire line. All of that has to become second nature, where you're not even thinking about that anymore. Then you go a little bit of a step further after you understand the offense, you understand the steps, the hat placement, the hand placement. When you're working with somebody else, then you begin to understand their strengths, their weaknesses. If I have 2-3 techniques and I know my right guard's not great in pass pro, I'm probably setting to my right guard all the time. So, and even if he's got a 1 technique or a guy in the shade, I'm still maybe looking at my left guard with a 3 technique if I know he's the one that usually struggles. Those are things that will come in time, but you have to get reps together. It's the only way to know how to do it. Everybody's got to be on the same page from when we come off the ball, when we leave a double team, when we feel like we need to climb to a linebacker, if someone's going to blitz, how long we can stay with that defender until we come off and pick up the blitz. Do we slide the protection, or do we have somebody who can pop out, and that's going to be a better option for us? All of those things just come with time. They come with reps. You got to do it together. That's why, honestly, we were talking about it on my morning show with Greg McElroy today, like offensive lines in the league, and just it's impossible to know right now, really. Like, I think Georgia's going to be really good. I think LSU is going to be really good. I think A&M's group's going to be really good. But after that, no idea. Kentucky could be pretty good. I think Auburn's got a chance to make a big improvement. Mississippi State's got some guys coming back that played good football, but they're going to do what I just told you about a few minutes ago, Mike, and now they're going to be blocking outside zone 20, 25 times a game.
Right.
Literally turning to the sideline and sprinting, and they've been taking vertical pass sets 70 times a game. I don't know how they're going to adjust to that. I have no idea. I think Tyler Booker at Alabama is going to be amazing, but the rest of that group hasn't really blown me away. So I don't, and they didn't play good football together last year very much. So there are a lot of questions about Tennessee lost their 2 best offensive linemen. Now that system protects that group a lot of the times, but they also have to step up at certain times, like they did in the Alabama game when they essentially shut Will Anderson down. So it's one of the reasons what I just stated about reps and reps together, that there aren't a lot of great offensive lines anymore. There's not. It's not a plug-and-play position. Now, it has to be in today's college football, but because of the communication, because of the continuity, because of the feel that has to take place for you to work together and be great as a unit, you can't just put 3 new guys in there and all of a sudden be good because the level of talent is better. So how do you win spring? Everybody understands what the assignment is, what's being asked of them on a certain play, technically how to operate within that. Okay, all that's got to be done, but maximize your reps together. And you might not have a starting 5 coming out of spring, but if you have 4 of the 5 or even 3 of the 5, those 3 need to be humming when you get to the end of the spring practice.
Right.
And Jake and Kendall and Hugh will have a pretty good feel of who that is. And if they can look at center, left guard, left tackle, or left guard over and say, we're good there. We just got to get this other spot figured out. Well, then you're still ahead of the curve, even though it might not look at it to you and I when we just watch it every now and then. So it's building as much continuity as possible and having as much understanding as possible of what the offense is actually asking of you.
Yeah. So you said something interesting. You said the best way to get better at it is by going against somebody who is trying to make you look bad every play, right? There are some coaches Cole, who are not a big fan of going ones versus ones in practice when it comes to, for injury reasons or whatever their excuse is.
Sure.
Back when I was filming Auburn football, it happened a lot. The ones versus ones were a thing. Courtney Taylor versus Carlos Rogers was a thing in practice constantly. How important is it that you get that, what you're talking about, that in practice against the best guys on your team, rather than trying to face a guy Richard Seymour for the first time, and then he embarrasses you?
It's critical, and it's more critical now because it is so limited. No matter how you operate, I mean, if you're Nick Saban and you're going ones versus ones every day, or if you're a coach that just doesn't believe in that, like there was a coach that's no longer in the SEC, and I can remember talking to him before we went into their season. It was like 2016, 17, maybe 18. And he was saying that they had 5 full pad practices before the season began. And only 2 or 3 of those practices did they actually hit and tackle to the ground. And I remember looking at Tom and Jordan and just saying, they ain't ready. I mean, plain and simple. They're not going to be ready. And then, Jordan agreed. He was like, you can't be. Like, it's not possible. So the difficulty now is, even if you want to be that, the amount of times that you can be that are so limited, it's very difficult to actually be. I actually don't think a college football player that plays at the line of scrimmage, a D tackle, a D end, an edge defender, a center guard tackle, even a tight end, a lot of times, I don't think, or even like an inside linebacker who's off the ball, I truly don't think you can be ready for the season anymore. I don't, because it's so limited, the amount of time you have in full pads doing those things that we were talking about. Number one, your body hasn't acclimated. Your body's not ready for the 20, 30, 50 car crashes that you're going to be in a football game. It's just not. It's not acclimated to that yet. That's why, and a lot of times with offensive lines or just players who have, or a lot physically is asked of them. I mean, I kind of use the Trey Smith example, because I remember when Trey played his last year at Tennessee, he didn't practice because of the blood clot issue that he had. And he was going on and off of his medicine. And so he had no contact throughout the course of the week. And then like week 6, all of a sudden he looked like the Trey from 2 years prior. And then week 7 and 8, he was like the most dominant player in college football. But it was too late for everybody to get on board with that, because he did struggle a little bit early. But he hadn't hit anybody in a year and a half. So now it's almost – I remember asking him, I said, how many of those early games were essentially practices for you? He said, all of them. He's like, I needed all of them. I just needed to go hit people to understand what it was like again. And I think to a certain extent, it's like that for all college football players, because we've backed so far off that they're just mentally, physically, emotionally not ready for what a game is. And then trying to do that with other guys in sync, in harmony, it's very difficult to make that happen. So I try not to really judge a lot of guys that are playing at or near the line of scrimmage until like week 4 or 5, because that's when I feel like you really start to get a good feel for just what it is and who they are. So, I mean, I would anticipate Hugh and his staff trying to get as much of that in as they can. But even if they get a lot of it in, Mike, it's nowhere near what it used to be. So it's still probably not going to be where they want it to be when the season kicks off.
Yeah, I mean, with so many new guys coming in and a lot to evaluate and trying to find the starting 5, the limited time is a challenge. 2 days isn't what it used to be, for example, just like you're talking about. There's so many hours they can have.
There is no 2 days anymore. It's not even a real thing.
It's not even a real thing, yeah. So they've eliminated a lot of where football players, I felt, found themselves as players. In the trenches, in those practices that you got to have where you would go down to the intramural field and just hit, right? There was a running back, there was a quarterback, and they were off limits. But the line would just line up against each other. They would snap the ball, and somebody would just try to win, right, until somebody passed out. So they obviously can't do that anymore. Hugh Freeze is going to have to try to find a way to get the most out of this line, because in my estimation, and I wanted to add, end on this and ask you, can Auburn be good if this offensive line does not take a significant step next year?
Well, I think part of that would depend on your definition of significant step. But I would lean more towards the other side of that this group does have to make pretty big improvements for this team to have a good season.
Right.
And
8 wins. We'll call it 8 wins is good in year one.
Yeah, to get to 8 wins, I think that group's going to have to be a lot better than they were the last 2-3 years. Maybe you go further back than that.
Well, Cole, let me interject this. So, is there a scheme fit that covers them enough to get to 8 wins here, based on what you talked about scheme kind of making them look better or worse?
Some of it, but I don't know if the quarterback's going to be good enough for it to operate that way. So, I mean, if you ask me right now, who am I more confident in this offense leaning on to get to 8 wins, quarterback or offensive line? I would probably tell you offensive line. Because I know you got a couple glass eaters up there. I know you got a couple guys that have played a lot of football. And I know you have 2 brilliant coaches that are working with them that are going to get them ready. And then on top of that, as you stated, you will be able to add some tempo. You will be able to add some quarterback run. You're going to get spread formations with the utilization of tight ends that are going to move and be players that line up in different spots. So I don't want to say trick the defense, but you're going to be able to force the defense into mistakes to almost steal yards at times. Right. That's going to be advantage Auburn offense. Now, however great the quarterback is, I'll tell you this, I probably am more concerned about receiver than I am quarterback or offensive line, because I just don't know if there is a guy that's going to go out there and erase mistakes and say, 3rd and 6, throw me the ball. I don't care what the coverage is. I'm going to make the catch. Like, I don't think that guy's on the roster right now. Doesn't mean that there's not some young receivers that could end up being pretty good. Doesn't mean that collectively that group can't have a season that helps Auburn get to 8 or 9 wins, because there is some talent that's there. It's definitely possible, but we just haven't seen it to the extent that we've seen it with some of these other people in some of these other positions. So, like, we've seen what Robbie can do as a dynamic runner. We've seen him throw some beautiful balls. Consistently, have we seen him run an offense in a successful way? No, not really. We haven't. We've seen some of these offensive linemen. Now, it might have been at East Carolina or Tulsa or junior college or in a limited amount at Auburn last year. We've seen them do some really good things. We just haven't seen them do it together. So, but with what you're saying about the offense being able to protect them sometimes, I think it'll be more helping them and maybe helping them come along a little bit faster to be able to offer up other ways for different players to be successful. I mean, I think you'll get 2 backs. I think you'll get 1 back motion out, try to find mismatches there. I think you have flex tight ends that are going to be able to line up in different places, and defenses will have trouble distinguishing how they're going to identify them. So you'll find matchup problems there. Like, those are the ways Auburn's going to have to win. Like, you're going to have Landon King or Fairweather designated a tight end lined up on a linebacker, and they can go win that. You're going to have a back motion out of the backfield, and a will linebacker follows him out, and that's a matchup you can win. Or when he motions out, they empty the box and gives you good run looks, and you don't have to be 95 Nebraska to gain 6 yards. Those are the things that Hugh and Phil can do to be able to give this offensive line and the offense in general advantages, because that's how they operate. And then if the group does come along, well, now you can get up 14 and in the end of the 3rd quarter say, just keep running inside zone. I don't give a shit what they're lined up in. Like, we can push them around, and they're tired because we've run 80 plays. So just go. Like, just put your foot on the gas. Let's maul them, and let's finish this game. So it can all come together at some point. It's just, what are they going to have to protect the most early? That's what I don't have the answers to. And if the offensive line takes big steps right away, it's going to make life a lot easier on the receivers and on whoever the quarterback is.
Former Auburn offensive lineman King Dunlap came on our show a while ago, and he talked about what it was like blocking for Michael Pitt. And, a guy who can move and is fast. And, do you think it'll be easier for these guys to have a pocket passer back there, or to have somebody like Robbie who could run, depending on where they're at? King was like, hey, listen, man, Vic was great, but sometimes it was tough because you never knew where he was going to be. And so
you'll have a defender just leave their pass rush. I mean, you're sitting there like you're trying to perfect your technique in a certain pass rush move, and then they just leave. Well, what do you do? Do you chase? Like, you're protecting the pocket here. Right. Do I chase them down? Or like they redirect inside? Okay, my assignment there would be to go slay in the D tackle because it's probably a twist. But if that quarterback has left, I need to go try to make sure that I cut off that defensive end from getting to my. It's very complicated. some of that would also depend on how it was being utilized. So like a mobile quarterback can be great, but are you utilizing design runs that forces the defense to play the backside and not have defensive ends and outside linebackers screaming flat down the line of scrimmage to take away your inside zone play or even your outside zone plays, or able to attack in pass rush situations in a different way? If you can utilize quarterback draws and things like that to force guys to stay in their pass rush lanes, that makes life easy on you all the time. Right. On the flip side of that, if I have somebody like a Joe Burrow who literally just knows how to manipulate the pocket, can leave when they want to, or a Bryce Young at Alabama last year that knows how to move and work the pocket, that can be just as valuable as the guy who runs a 4-2, because now he understands how to move, create space, find a window to find more big plays down the field. So I think to answer that question, it all depends on exactly how the offense is designed, because it can be designed with a lot of quarterback runs that even it up and help you out in ways with that. But it can be designed as a pass-heavy offense where a guy who just understands how to not be a statue and where to move to and what spot to get to be able to throw a complete pass, that can help you out just as much as the other side can.
Mm. Sounds like scheme is going to be really important for Hugh Freeze in 2023, depending on where the strengths and weaknesses are. The former offensive lineman here is leading on the offensive line for Auburn to have a good season. Cole, I want to thank you for joining me. Tell folks where they can find you. You got a YouTube channel going now. Obviously, you're on Man and Q. Tell folks how they can find you and listen to you.
Yeah, jocksfm.com or 94.5 FM in Birmingham. That is 7 to 10 a.m. weekdays. The YouTube channel's up. We're trying to build it a little bit. I've done what you and your co-hosts have asked me to do and beg people to subscribe. It is at Cube Show 61 on YouTube. Just search Cube Show, and you should be able to find it. We drop episodes every Sunday. We did our Auburn preview a couple weeks ago, so that's still out there. You can go watch that. Did Kentucky this week, and so we're going to hit all the teams through spring. If there's any news, and we try to take a look at different transfers into the SEC and where they came from and what they might be able to do. So just trying to deliver college football content on Sundays. We'll review all the spring games that we have the ability to see, break that film down, tell you what we saw, and usually every Sunday afternoon that thing is going to drop. So please go subscribe if you have it in you.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of Building Rapport with Cole Cubelic. If you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the Thru Rapport on every social media platform. TW Rapport on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, for you.